Seeing my unmanned produce stand vandalized, I was deeply saddened. Observing both my plight and the stand's sorry state, my grandson became furious.
This is unforgivable. Let's use this.
I was surprised by the device my grandson produced. After some thought, I agreed to install it at the stand, as he suggested. My grandson, clearly excited, said about the task, "This will surely solve it. Leave the rest to me."
He reassured me before quickly heading home.
That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a while. Come early morning, a call from my grandson sent me hurrying to the stand. The culprit had been caught red-handed, but it was someone I never expected, leaving me in shock. The thief lay there, eyes rolling back, foaming at the mouth.
Why would you do this?
I asked, tears welling up as I tended to them, while my grandson called for an ambulance. Christy, 65 years old this year. My daughter, born when I was young, is already married, leaving me with one grandson. Gordon, my grandson, decided last year to take over my farm and enrolled in agriculture college. My husband passed away in a traffic accident 5 years ago, but my grandson and daughter frequently visit, so I've never felt too lonely. Though not large, my farm, cultivated with care for 40 years, produces high-quality vegetables, highly valued by many. Fortunately, I have a contract to supply a local hotel, ensuring a steady income. I love farming and enjoy my retirement doing what I love. Moreover, the farm has been in my father's family for generations. Thus, the house I live in is also my childhood home, surrounded by neighbors I've known since I was a child. My closest friend Hazel, who married into her family's farm, is still my neighbor, so I never despaired, even when I became a widow. I've been quite content with my life. Recently, my grandson suggested using an unmanned stand to sell our excess produce at a low price. Though not a huge seller, it's a good way to share with neighbors. And sometimes people leave notes of appreciation, encouraging me to continue. However, lately, we've had a problem. Theft at the stand. I refill the stand with vegetables twice a day, morning and evening, and the thief strikes at night. Hazel and I tried changing the refill times unpredictably, but to little effect. One day, concerned about me, Hazel came over. As I served her coffee on the terrace, I vented my frustrations.
I just can't catch the thief. It's so exhausting. Exactly.
I agreed, grateful for her understanding, and shared all the countermeasures my grandson had suggested. Gordon's ideas were to install a dummy security camera, hang a bell at the entrance overnight, and set up a motion-activated light. He provided all the equipment, so all I needed to do was turn them on and off.
I am grateful to him and to my daughter and her husband. I just hope the thief stops soon.
Hazel replied gently, "I hope so too." Her laid-back nature sometimes made it hard to convey urgency, but her calming presence was a comfort. I happily agreed. Then we went to the unmanned sales booth and showed off the bells, security cameras, and lights with motion sensors. Furthermore, my grandchild recently got into DIY and made something like a back door for the booth, which amazed Hazel, and she complimented us. I felt so happy. The idea of my grandchild had seemed to work. As for about 4 days, the vegetables at the booth weren't stolen. Maybe this way, even if we don't find the culprit, the problem might resolve itself. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I hoped that would be the case. However, my hopes were dashed.
This is terrible.
One morning about 4 days later, I went to the booth with freshly harvested vegetables, only to find the ones I had laid out the day before completely trashed. There was no bell sound last night. How did they get in? I noticed the back door slightly ajar.
Hazel, look at this. The vegetables are all ruined.
Hazel, seeing where I pointed, covered her mouth in shock. She seemed at a loss for words. She offered to help clean up, so I accepted. I decided not to put vegetables out for sale that day and took them home instead. I gave Hazel more vegetables than usual. She said I didn't have to worry about it, but I felt I should. After Hazel left, I called my grandchild to ask if there were any more security measures we could take.
Hey, any good ideas for security measures?
I told my grandchild about the morning's disaster and asked. After a moment of thought, my grandchild said there might be a solution, and ended the call saying they'd come to my house later. In the evening, after my grandchild arrived, we headed to the booth together. The stand at the booth was stained with crushed tomatoes and other vegetables, a clear sign of the mess, even without the vegetables. My grandchild inspected and removed all the bells, then cleaned and tidied the wood stand.
That should do it. No sign of tampering with the bells or the light's power source, since being turned off. And the back door so inconspicuous. Grandma, did you tell anyone about this?
I honestly replied the only person I told was Hazel.
Hearing that, my grandchild seemed to ponder for a moment and then asked to leave the vegetables out as usual. They increased the number of bells and locked the back door. I neatly arranged the vegetables, hoping for the best. That night, I heard bells from the field. My grandchild had warned me not to go out if the bells rang at night, so I just noted the time. The next morning, we went to the booth and found all the bell strings cut and lying on the ground. The destruction was worse than before the security was enhanced.
I can't believe this.
Looking at the devastated booth, I felt immensely sad. Seeing my dismay and the state of the booth, my grandchild became furious.
We can't let this go. Let's use this.
I was surprised by the device my grandchild brought out. After some hesitation, I agreed to set it up at the booth. My grandchild seemed excited while installing it.
This will surely solve it. Leave the rest to me.
Saying so, my grandchild quickly left. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a while. In the early morning, my grandchild called, and I rushed to the booth. The culprit was caught, but it was someone I never expected. The culprit was lying on the ground, eyes rolled back, foaming at the mouth.
Why would you do this?
As my grandchild called for an ambulance, I attended to the culprit, tears welling up in shock. In the countryside, an ambulance siren often brings neighbors out to see what happened. While the paramedics were tending to the culprit, our neighbor Isabella came over to check on us. Hey, what happened?
Well,
I started to explain when the culprit regained consciousness and began to rise at the edge of my vision. Then the culprit pointed at me and shouted, "She tricked me! It's her fault!" Stunned by the accusation, I was frozen in place. My grandchild stepped in to defend me and retorted,
Knowing Grandma was in trouble, it was you who harassed her, wasn't it, Hazel?
Yes, the person foaming and fallen was Hazel. With her hair more disheveled than ever, Hazel denied my grandchild's words. But the evidence lying around clearly pointed to her as the culprit.
Hazel, the radishes and carrots next to you? They were from our field and placed in the unmanned sales booth, weren't they?
I was taken aback by Hazel's glaring accusation. I had never heard Hazel speak like that before, and was completely bewildered. In my stead, my grandchild sighed and argued back.
Do you think you can fool anyone with that? The unmanned booth was sealed with bells right after Grandmother placed the vegetables there last evening. So unless someone forced their way in, those vegetables couldn't have been taken. When I went there in the morning, they were already cut. The place was already trashed.
Laughing loudly at Hazel's words, my grandson then sat down in front of her and picked up a pair of scissors lying next to the vegetables.
Holding scissors, huh? Also, the payment box was empty. Yet, only the vegetables you claim to have bought were left intact after such destruction. That's odd.
Hazel turned pale as she was taken to the hospital in the ambulance. My grandchild watched her go, then finally turned to me.
Are you okay, Grandma?
But Hazel?
I couldn't finish my sentence, and my grandson nodded in agreement. Hazel was an important childhood friend who loved my grandchild, so what could have happened to her?
For now, let's leave the rest to the police. I'll clean up here, Grandma. You should rest at home.
Yes, thank you.
I returned home disheartened and sat in a chair. My grandchild finished cleaning quickly and returned.
Then they explained how the device that caught Hazel worked. First, when the bell was cut, it unlocked a box attached to the ceiling of the building. We had replaced the dummy security cameras with real ones last time, but since the motion sensor light's power was expected to be cut, I cleverly hid a camera inside the box.
My grandchild proudly exclaimed. Hazel, after making a mess of the place, picked up her desired share to take home. But the moment she lifted them, a camera and my grandchild's homemade scarecrow dropped from the ceiling, connected by a string. The camera flashed, capturing Hazel's image just as the scarecrow hit her. According to my grandchild, Hazel was perfectly caught in the trap, panicked by the sudden flash and the colliding scarecrow, leading to her collapse and foaming at the mouth.
Isn't that a bit too much?
But it felt good, right?
I couldn't respond to my grandchild's grin and reply. My grandchild was spot on. Although I was shocked that Hazel was the culprit, the thought of her literally being taken aback lifted my spirits. A few hours later, I received a call from Hazel's husband, Jim. He told me Hazel had bruised her back in the fall, but otherwise she was fine.
Hazel is ranting that it's your fault. But what happened?
It seemed even he was baffled by Hazel's behavior, which was apparent even over the phone. Since Hazel was admitted for examination and wouldn't be home until the day after tomorrow, I asked Jim to visit me before then.
Sorry for the late visit. This is Jim?
Jim came over that night. My grandchild, daughter, son-in-law, and I were there, which made me feel more at ease.
As I recounted the events, Jim nearly fainted, saying, "I'm sorry. I just can't believe this is about my wife."
I understand. I still can't believe it either.
I agreed with him as I spoke. Hazel had been a friend for over 60 years, but I never imagined or wanted to believe she could do such things. However, after watching the footage my grandchild showed, I had no choice but to accept it.
This is the footage from the last time the booth was vandalized.
The video my grandchild played on the TV was shocking. In the dim light, only the lamp Hazel brought dimly illuminated the booth, showing her face. In that faint light, Hazel was seen picking vegetables, putting them in her basket, then smashing and rubbing the rest on the ground and stand. Hazel's face was contorted with an uncharacteristically vile smile.
This is Hazel? I can't believe she would do this.
Jim was shocked beyond belief. I also couldn't accept this new side of Hazel I had never seen before. After some thought, Jim looked up with determination.
I don't think I can accept her anymore. I'm considering a divorce.
Is that so?
My grandchild replied calmly to Jim's decision. Disappointed, Jim left. A few days later, after being discharged, Hazel stormed into my house. Hazel, now showing her true nature, was furious. I felt safe because my grandchild and his daughter's family had stayed with me. But if I had been alone, Hazel's aggression might have terrified me.
Hazel, Mom, and son told me everything. Why would the kind Hazel I knew do this?
My daughter asked through the intercom, and Hazel started screaming hysterically. Her voice was so high-pitched that the intercom cracked, making it hard to understand, but I gathered she blamed me for Jim leaving. Apparently, Jim had packed his things and announced their divorce when he dropped Hazel off after her discharge, then returned to his parents' home. You must have said something unnecessary, I'm sure of it. All we could do was sigh at Hazel's accusations. After about 15 minutes of her yelling through the intercom, a siren sounded from down the street and the police arrived. Apparently called by my grandchild. Surprised by the officers, Hazel continued to berate me. It was clear then that my friendship with Hazel was over. In the end, Jim didn't come pick her up. Instead, her son Tom, who lived far away, was called. Tired as he was, he came to my house first and greeted me very politely. When I said this, Hazel's son Tom sighed and shared a shocking story. Apparently, Hazel had been harassing Tom's wife since they got married. Initially, Tom's wife tried to bear it, but the stress eventually took a toll on her health, especially around the time she found out she was pregnant, leading Tom to move away without telling their new address. Unbeknownst to me, Hazel had always been this way, acting as a gentle and kind woman in front of Jim and outsiders, but showing a harsher side only to her son. The reason Tom believed his wife's complaint so quickly was now clear. Tom said this, apologizing again. He added that Jim would contact me later regarding compensation for the vegetables. All I wanted to know was why she did what she did. So, I suggested to Tom, before Hazel goes to the facility, I'd like to have a talk with her. He reluctantly agreed. We chose a family restaurant on the outskirts of town for the meeting, hoping Hazel would be more likely to talk there. On the day, grumbling led by her son. When she saw me, she clicked her tongue. The woman before me bore no resemblance to the childhood friend I'd known for over 60 years.
Hazel, please don't say that. Just tell me why you did what you did.
When I asked, Hazel laughed mockingly. When I nodded again, it seemed to irritate her further, and she clicked her tongue again. Hazel reacted noticeably to her son's words. Tom continued unfazed. Hazel's face turned red. Essentially, Hazel had always disliked me. With everything laid bare, Hazel had no more insults to hurl.
Well, I can't get her to admit it, but it seems her jealousy of Christy is the cause. Once Mom is in the facility, we plan to sell the land and won't bother you anymore. Please rest assured.
Hazel's son apologized and then left with her. It looked like he was taking her straight to the facility. That was the last time I saw Hazel. I said goodbye to a friend of over 60 years. Afterward, Hazel entered the facility. It's a spacious place on a hill, a bit far away with few residents and not much in the way of entertainment. She has no visitors, only a few fellow residents and the staff to talk to. Hazel is always complaining and has no one to listen, leading to a lackluster life. She's recently shown signs of dementia. Jim visited me a while after Hazel was admitted. He apologized again, saying he hadn't apologized enough at the time, but in a way, Jim was also a victim. Jim decided to give Hazel only enough property division to cover her facility costs.
He took extra for the trouble Hazel caused with the vegetables.
It seems the cost of Hazel's stay in the facility will be covered by the sale of her family's land, as Jim had planned to ensure it wouldn't burden his son and daughter-in-law. After that, I reopened the unmanned sales booth. There have been no more pranks, and life is beautiful. My grandchild publicized the booth on something called Unmanned Sales Booth SNS, which has brought a lot of attention. There's always a crowd now. Everyone pays properly and takes their vegetables. The notebook fills up quickly, and I have to replace it weekly. It's full of warm comments, and reading them before bed has become my daily routine. While my daughter and son-in-law say they don't want to take over the farm, they help with the harvest and booth maintenance on weekends. Furthermore, my grandchild is eagerly gaining agricultural knowledge to improve my farm. Surrounded by my kind grandchild and daughter's family, I feel very happy.